The crack of a rifle shot pierced the morning air as Priscilla Turner's stagecoach lurched violently, sending her sprawling across the worn leather seat. Her life as a mail-order bride was already proving far more treacherous than the charming letters from her prospective husband had suggested. "Bandits!" the driver shouted from above. "Hold tight, miss." Priscilla clutched her small valise to her chest as the stagecoach picked up speed, thundering down the dusty road that led to Dillon, Montana. The year was 1876, and at 23 years of age, she was leaving behind a life of drudgery in Philadelphia for the promise of marriage to a man she'd never met, a cattle rancher who'd advertised for a bride in the matrimonial news. The stagecoach swerved sharply around a bend, and Priscilla heard a sickening crack followed by the driver's curse. The vehicle tilted precariously before coming to a grinding halt that threw her forward again. "Miss Turner." The driver, an elderly man named Gus, peered through the window, his weathered face etched with concern. "We've lost a wheel, and those bandits ain't far behind." Priscilla's heart hammered in her chest. "What should we do?" "I need to unhitch the horses before those bandits take him too." Gus pulled his revolver from his holster. "You might want to find some place to hide, miss. This stretch is known as Bandit Road for good reason." Priscilla's mouth went dry. She had sold everything she owned to purchase passage west, answering the advertisement of a stranger who promised a comfortable home and respectable life. Now, stranded on a desolate stretch of road with bandits approaching, that future seemed to be slipping away before it had even begun. She climbed down from the coach, her simple blue traveling dress already coated with a fine layer of Montana dust. The vast, open landscape offered little in the way of shelter, just scrubby sagebrush and distant mountains. "Miss, get yourself behind those rocks over yonder," Gus instructed, nodding toward a small outcropping about 50 yards from the road. "I'll do what I can here." Priscilla took a few hesitant steps toward the indicated hiding place when she heard the distant thunder of hoofbeats. Her breath caught in her throat, certain it was the bandits returning to finish what they'd started. Instead, a lone rider appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the bright morning sky. As he drew closer, she could make out his form, tall and broad-shouldered, sitting easy in the saddle of a magnificent chestnut horse. The stranger brought his mount to a halt beside the disabled stagecoach. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes, a dusty canvas coat, and well-worn leather chaps. A revolver hung at his hip. "Looks like you folks could use some help," he said, dismounting in one fluid motion. His voice was deep and clear, carrying across the open space. "Mighty kind of you, stranger," Gus replied warily, his hand still resting on his gun, "but we've just been shot at. Bandits took out our wheel." The newcomer surveyed the scene with a practiced eye. "I heard the shots. The Blackwell gang's been working this stretch. They usually circle back." He turned toward Priscilla, tipping his hat slightly. "Madam." For the first time, she got a good look at his face. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 28 or 30, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. A thin scar ran along his jawline, disappearing into the shadow of his hat. "I'm Nathan Braddock," he said. "Most folks call me Nate." "Priscilla Turner," she replied, finding her voice at last. "I'm on my way to Dillon." A flicker of recognition crossed his features. "You're not answering Emmett Davidson's advertisement for a bride, are you?" Priscilla blinked in surprise. "Yes, I am. Do you know Mr. Davidson?" Nathan's expression darkened. "I know him. But we don't have time to discuss that now. Those bandits will be back soon. Let's get this wheel fixed and get you to safety." He strode to his horse and removed several tools from his saddlebags, then knelt beside the broken wheel. "The axle's damaged, but I might be able to make it hold until we reach town." Gus watched with uncertainty. "You think you can fix it that quick?" "I'll need to fashion a temporary brace." Nathan glanced at the sun's position. "We've got maybe 20 minutes before those bandits return." Priscilla found herself drawn to the stranger's confident movements as he worked. His hands were strong and capable, moving with purpose and precision. "Miss Turner," Nathan called without looking up, "there's a canteen in my saddlebag. Would you mind fetching it? This'll go quicker if I don't die of thirst." She hurried to his horse, finding the canteen easily. When she returned, he paused in his work just long enough to take a long drink, water trickling down his chin in his haste. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Thank you." His eyes met hers briefly. "So what brings a lady like you out to Montana territory?" Priscilla straightened her shoulders. "I'm to be married. Mr. Davidson wrote that he has a successful cattle ranch outside of Dillon. He's seeking a wife to help establish a proper home." Nathan returned to his work, removing his hat to wipe sweat from his brow. "And you've never met this man?" "We've corresponded for 6 months. His letters were quite persuasive." She hesitated, suddenly uncertain under Nathan's skeptical gaze. "It's a respectable arrangement." "Respectable," he repeated, as though testing the word. "Madam, I don't mean to frighten you, but there's something you should know." The distant sound of hoofbeats interrupted him. Nathan's head snapped up, his expression grim. "They're coming back. Gus, help me get this wheel on. Miss Turner, gather your things and be ready to move." The next few minutes passed in a flurry of activity. Nathan and Gus worked together to secure the makeshift repair to the wheel axle, while Priscilla gathered her small traveling bag and the box lunch she'd barely touched. "It won't hold forever," Nathan warned as he tightened the last of his improvised braces, "but it should get you to Dillon." "You're coming with us?" Priscilla asked, unable to keep the hope from her voice. Nathan shook his head. "I'll ride alongside and keep watch. If the wheel starts to give, we'll stop and reassess." The hoofbeats grew louder. Gus climbed back into the driver's seat while Nathan helped Priscilla into the coach. "Stay low," he instructed, his hand lingering on hers for just a moment. "If there's shooting, cover your head." Before she could respond, he was back on his horse, riding parallel to the stagecoach as Gus snapped the reins. The coach lurched forward and Priscilla held her breath, expecting the repaired wheel to break again at any moment. But it held, and they gathered speed on the dusty road. Nathan rode ahead, scanning the landscape. When he signaled, Gus turned the coach off the main road onto a less traveled trail. "Taking the long way," Gus called down to Priscilla. "Mr. Braddock knows these parts well." For the next hour, they traveled in tense silence, the only sounds the creaking of the coach, the pounding of hooves, and the occasional call from Nathan directing a change in their route. Finally, they emerged onto a wider road, and in the distance, Priscilla could see the outline of a town. "Dillon," Gus announced with relief. "We made it, miss." Nathan rode alongside the coach window. "The wheel's holding better than I expected, but not for much longer. We need to get you straight to the blacksmith." As they approached the town, Priscilla observed the familiar markers of Western settlements: a church steeple, a main street lined with businesses, horses tied at hitching posts. It wasn't large, but it appeared more established than she had feared. Gus guided the stagecoach directly to a large barn-like structure with a sign reading Thompson's Blacksmith and Wagon Repair. As they pulled to a stop, the repaired wheel finally gave way, tilting the coach at a precarious angle. "Just in time," Nathan remarked, dismounting and moving to help Priscilla down. His hands encircled her waist as he lifted her from the coach, and despite her fatigue and anxiety, she felt a flutter in her stomach at his touch. He set her down gently on the dusty street. "Thank you, Mr. Braddock," she said, meeting his gaze. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along when you did." A shadow crossed his face. "You might have been spared a different kind of trouble." Before she could ask what he meant, a tall, barrel-chested man emerged from the blacksmith shop, wiping his hands on a stained apron. "Nate, didn't expect to see you in town today." The blacksmith's eyes shifted to Priscilla, and his expression changed. "This wouldn't be Davidson's mail-order bride, would it?" "It would," Nathan confirmed grimly. "Miss Turner, this is Samuel Thompson, the finest blacksmith in Montana territory." Samuel removed his cap, revealing a shock of gray-streaked hair. "Madam, welcome to Dillon." "Though I'm not sure welcome is the right word, considering." Priscilla frowned, glancing between the two men. "Is there something about Mr. Davidson that I should know?" The men exchanged a look that sent a chill down Priscilla's spine. Nathan sighed, adjusting his hat. "Miss Turner, Emmett Davidson isn't exactly what his letters probably claimed, but this isn't the place to discuss it." He turned to the blacksmith. Sam, can you fix up this coach? The wheel's shot and the axle needs work. Of course, might take a day or two. Nathan nodded, then addressed Gus. You'll be staying at the hotel? Yes, sir. Company pays for it when we're delayed. Good. Nathan turned back to Priscilla. Miss Turner, may I escort you to the hotel? We can talk there. Priscilla hesitated, her mind racing with questions and concerns. Everything had happened so quickly, the attack, the breakdown, and now these cryptic warnings about the man she had traveled thousands of miles to marry. I suppose that would be acceptable, she finally replied, gathering her skirts. Though I should send word to Mr. Davidson that I've arrived. Let's hold off on that, Nathan suggested, offering his arm. Just until we've had a chance to talk. As they walked down the main street of Dillon, Priscilla was acutely aware of the curious glances they received. She tried to focus on the buildings they passed: a general store, a bank, a small restaurant advertising home cooking. It's smaller than Philadelphia, Nathan commented, noting her observations. Yes, but it seems orderly, she paused. How long have you lived here, Mr. Braddock? Born and raised just outside of town. My family's ranch is about 10 miles north. He guided her toward a 2-story building with a sign reading Dillon Hotel. It's not fancy, but Mrs. Porter keeps it clean. The hotel lobby was simply furnished, but as promised, immaculately clean. A plump woman with silver-streaked hair looked up from her ledger as they entered, her eyebrows rising at the sight of Nathan with a well-dressed young woman on his arm. Nathan Braddock, as I live and breathe, haven't seen you in town for weeks. Her gaze shifted to Priscilla with open curiosity. Mrs. Porter, this is Miss Priscilla Turner. She needs a room for at least a few days. Recognition dawned on the woman's face. Oh, you must be, yes, she's come a long way, Nathan interrupted, and had quite a journey. The stagecoach was attacked and a wheel broke on Bandit Road, Mrs. Porter's hand flew to her chest. Merciful heavens, are you hurt, dear? I'm fine, thank you, Priscilla assured her. Mr. Braddock came to our rescue. The older woman shot Nathan an approving look. He would, best man in the county, this one. She retrieved a key from a hook behind her. Room 3, upstairs on the right. It has a nice view of the mountains. Thank you. Priscilla reached for her small purse, but Nathan placed a hand on her arm. I'll take care of it for now, he said quietly. She started to protest, but the determined set of his jaw stopped her. Instead, she thanked Mrs. Porter and allowed Nathan to carry her valise up the narrow staircase. The room was simple but comfortable, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small writing desk, and a window that indeed offered a view of the distant mountains. Nathan set her bag on a chair and remained standing near the door, hat in hand, as though uncertain of his next move. Priscilla removed her gloves and bonnet, placing them carefully on the desk. Now, Mr. Braddock, I believe you have something to tell me about the man I've come to marry. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, leaving it slightly tousled. Miss Turner, what exactly did Emmett Davidson tell you about himself? He wrote that he has a successful cattle ranch with a comfortable house. That he's 35 years old, never married, and has established himself well enough to provide for a wife. She recounted the details from memory. He said he's seeking a respectable woman who values home and family as he was raised to do. Nathan's expression darkened. Did he mention that he's been engaged 3 times in the past 2 years, or that his successful ranch consists of 20 acres and a half dozen sickly cows? Priscilla felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her. What? Emmett Davidson is not what he claims to be. His family had money once, but he's gambled most of it away. He keeps advertising for brides from back east, women who bring their savings with them. Once he gets their money, something always happens to end the engagement. That can't be true. Priscilla sank onto the edge of the bed. We corresponded for months. His letters were so sincere, so persuasive, Nathan finished for her, echoing her earlier description. He's good with words, I'll give him that. But I've seen 3 women come to Dillon with hopes just like yours, only to leave broken-hearted and penniless. A horrible thought struck her. How do I know you're telling the truth? I've only just met you. Nathan's eyes met hers directly. You don't. But before you meet Davidson, ask around town about him. Ask Mrs. Porter, ask Samuel at the blacksmith shop, ask Sheriff Mills, then decide for yourself. Priscilla pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to make sense of everything. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." A faint smile touched his lips. "Maybe I'm tired of watching Emmett Davidson break hearts and tarnish the reputation of decent folks in this territory." He moved toward the door. "Get some rest, Miss Turner. I'll come by tomorrow and we can figure out what to do next." "What to do next?" she repeated hollowly. "I've spent every penny I had to come here. I have nowhere else to go." Nathan paused, his hand on the doorknob. "We'll find a solution. Dylan has good people, despite the Emmett Davidsons of the world." He opened the door. "I promise you won't face this alone." After he left, Priscilla sat motionless for several minutes, staring at the wall. Then, with trembling hands, she unpacked her valise, carefully removing the stack of letters tied with a blue ribbon. Emmett Davidson's handwriting stared back at her, flowing and confident. She began to read them again, this time looking for the inconsistencies and exaggerations she had been too eager to see before. By the time darkness fell outside her window, Priscilla had cried all the tears she would allow herself. Tomorrow, she would learn the truth about Emmett Davidson. And then, somehow, she would find a way forward. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the small window of Priscilla's hotel room. She had slept fitfully, her dreams filled with bandits, broken wheels, and a faceless man who morphed from the charming gentleman of her imagination into something sinister. She dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a forest green cotton with modest lace at the collar. Her best dress, a blue silk, she had saved for meeting Emmett Davidson. Now she wasn't certain that meeting would ever take place or if she wanted it to. A soft knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. When she opened it, expecting to see Nathan, she instead found Mrs. Porter holding a breakfast tray. "Good morning, dear. Thought you might appreciate breakfast in your room today after your ordeal yesterday." The older woman bustled in, setting the tray on the small table. "Coffee, eggs, and biscuits, nothing fancy, but it'll keep your strength up." "Thank you, Mrs. Porter, that's very kind." Priscilla hesitated, then decided to be direct. "May I ask you something about Emmett Davidson?" Mrs. Porter's hands stilled on the tray and her expression grew serious. "So Nate told you, did he?" "He suggested that Mr. Davidson might not be the man he represented himself to be in his letters." The older woman sighed heavily. "Sit down, Miss Turner. You should eat while we talk." Priscilla did as suggested, taking a small bite of the eggs, which were surprisingly good despite her lack of appetite. "Emmett Davidson comes from one of the oldest families in the territory," Mrs. Porter began, settling herself in the room's only chair. "His grandfather established a successful ranch and left it to Emmett's father, who expanded it further. By all rights, Emmett should be one of the wealthiest men in the county." She shook her head sadly. "But some men aren't content with honest work. Emmett developed a taste for gambling and whiskey early on. When his father died 5 years ago, he inherited everything and began losing it almost immediately." Priscilla set down her fork. "And the women, Mr. Braddock mentioned other brides, 3 that I know of, Mrs. Porter counted on her fingers. "There was Miss Sarah from Boston who arrived about 2 years ago. She left after a month in tears. Then Miss Catherine from Chicago. She was smarter, figured out what kind of man he was in a week and demanded Stagecoach fare home. Last was Miss Elizabeth from St. Louis just 6 months ago. Poor girl actually married him, but it was annulled within a month when she discovered he'd taken her dowry straight to the gambling tables in Helena." Priscilla felt ill. "And no one stops him. The law, I mean, sheriffs looked into it, but Davidson's careful. Makes no promises in writing that he can't technically fulfill, and most women are too embarrassed to make formal complaints." Mrs. Porter's expression softened. "You're lucky Nathan found you first. He's been warning folks at the Stagecoach office to look out for Davidson's brides, but your coach wasn't supposed to arrive until tomorrow." "We made good time until the bandits," Priscilla murmured, pushing her plate away. "Mrs. Porter, what am I to do now?" "I have no money to return east and no family waiting for me there even if I could." The older woman patted her hand. "First, you'll finish your breakfast, then we'll talk to Nathan. That young man has a good head on his shoulders, even if he is too stubborn for his own good sometimes." As if summoned by her words, another knock sounded at the door. This time it was Nathan, looking fresher than he had the day before in a clean shirt and dark vest, though his eyes suggested he hadn't slept much better than Priscilla. "Good morning, ladies," he greeted them, remaining in the doorway. "I see Mrs. Porter has already filled you in on our local scoundrel." Mrs. Porter rose from her chair. "I've told her what I know. Now it's your turn to help figure out what comes next." She squeezed Priscilla's shoulder as she passed. "Don't you worry, dear, we take care of our own in Dillon." After she left, Nathan entered the room fully but remained standing near the door, his hat in his hands. "How are you this morning, Miss Turner?" Confused, angry, embarrassed. Priscilla managed a weak smile. "But alive, thanks to you." He waved off her thanks. Any decent person would have stopped to help, perhaps, but not everyone could have fixed a broken wheel under pressure or known how to evade bandits. She studied him more carefully in the morning light. He was handsome in a rugged way, with laugh lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than he had in their brief acquaintance. "Have you decided what you want to do about Davidson?" Nathan asked, interrupting her observations. Priscilla squared her shoulders. "I want to meet him." Nathan's eyebrows shot up. "Meet him after everything you've learned? I need to see him face to face, to understand how I could have been so thoroughly deceived." She stood, smoothing her skirt, "and to let him know that his scheme ends with me." A slow smile spread across Nathan's face. "Miss Turner, I believe I underestimated you." "Most people do," she replied with more confidence than she felt. "Will you help me on one condition?" His expression grew serious. "You let me be present, not necessarily in the same room, but nearby." Davidson can be unpredictable when confronted. Priscilla considered this. "That seems reasonable. Do you know where to find him this time of day? He'll be at Fenton's saloon, nursing his morning whiskey and plotting his next scheme." Nathan offered his arm. "If you're ready, we can go now." The main street of Dillon was busier than it had been the previous afternoon, with wagons and riders moving between businesses and shopkeepers sweeping the boardwalks in front of their establishments. Several people called greetings to Nathan, their curious gazes lingering on Priscilla. Fenton's saloon stood at the far end of the street, a two-story building with peeling paint and unwashed windows. Nathan paused outside. "Are you certain about this? We could send word through the sheriff instead." Priscilla took a deep breath. "I'm certain. I need to see him with my own eyes." Nathan nodded, pushing open the batwing doors. Inside, the saloon was dimly lit and nearly empty, with only a bartender polishing glasses and two customers, a grizzled old miner nursing a beer at the bar, and a well-dressed man seated alone at a corner table, studying a hand of solitaire. "That's him," Nathan murmured. Corner table. Priscilla studied the man who had nearly become her husband. Emmett Davidson was handsome in a conventional way, with neatly combed dark hair and a waxed mustache. He wore an expensive suit that had seen better days and a gold watch chain draped across his vest. As they watched, he took a sip from a glass of amber liquid, grimacing slightly at the taste. "I'll wait at the bar," Nathan said quietly. "Call if you need me." Drawing a steadying breath, Priscilla crossed the saloon floor, her boots echoing on the wooden planks. Davidson looked up at her approach, confusion giving way to recognition and then alarm as he scrambled to his feet. "Miss Turner, you're early. I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." He quickly composed his features into a welcoming smile, extending his hand. What a pleasant surprise. Priscilla ignored his outstretched hand. "Mr. Davidson, I believe we need to discuss the discrepancies between your letters and reality." His smile faltered only slightly. "I don't understand. Perhaps we should continue this conversation at my home. I've prepared everything for your arrival, have you? As you prepared for Miss Sarah, Miss Catherine, and Miss Elizabeth." Priscilla kept her voice level, even as she saw his face drain of color. "I've learned quite a bit about you since arriving in Dillon." Davidson's eyes darted around the saloon, landing briefly on Nathan at the bar before returning to Priscilla. His expression hardened. "I see Braddock got to you first." "Whatever he's told you, he told me enough to make me ask questions," she interrupted. "The answers came from others in town, people who have watched your scheme play out before." Davidson took a step closer, lowering his voice. Now listen here. You've traveled a long way and I've gone to considerable expense to bring you here. We had an arrangement based on lies. Priscilla held her ground. You described a prosperous ranch, Mr. Davidson, a comfortable home, a man of means and character. His face flushed with anger. And what did you promise? A young, obedient wife with a substantial dowry. Where is this dowry you mentioned in your letters? Priscilla felt a chill at the calculation in his eyes. I never mentioned a dowry. I wrote that I had sufficient funds for my journey west, which I spent entirely on getting here. Davidson's expression shifted from anger to contempt. Then you're of no use to me, are you? He gathered his cards from the table, stuffing them into his pocket. Good day, Miss Turner. I suggest you find the next stagecoach east, though I hear the Bandit road can be treacherous this time of year. The threat in his words was unmistakable. Before Priscilla could respond, Nathan appeared at her side, his stance casual but his eyes hard. Problem, Davidson. The other man's lip curled. Nothing that concerns you, Braddock. This is between me and my fiancé. Former fiancé, Priscilla corrected firmly. Our arrangement is terminated, Mr. Davidson. I will be informing the postal authorities about your fraudulent advertisements. Davidson's hand moved toward his pocket and Nathan tensed beside her. But the other man merely withdrew a handkerchief, dabbing at his forehead with exaggerated politeness. Do what you must, Miss Turner, but remember, your word against mine means little here. I am, after all, from one of the founding families of this territory. He tipped his hat mockingly. I wish you luck finding your way home. I hear it's a long, expensive journey for a woman alone. With that, he brushed past them and left the saloon, the batwing doors swinging in his wake. Priscilla remained rooted to the spot, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and indignation. You handled that well, Nathan said quietly. Did I? She turned to face him, suddenly overwhelmed by her situation. I'm stranded in a strange town with no money and no prospects. I'd say I've handled everything rather poorly. Nathan's expression softened. You're being too hard on yourself, and you're not without options in Dillon. What options? I can't afford passage home, and I have no skills that would. She stopped abruptly, a realization dawning. Actually, that's not entirely true. I was a teacher's assistant in Philadelphia before I answered Mr. Davidson's advertisement. A teacher? Nathan's face brightened. Miss Turner, that might be the solution to both your problems and ours. Dillon's schoolteacher, Mrs. Abernathy has been talking about retiring for years. The town council has been searching for a replacement. Hope flickered to life within her. Do you really think they would consider me, without references or proper introduction? I'm on the town council, Nathan replied with a small smile. And I'd say pulling a wheel off a stagecoach while under threat from bandits counts as a proper introduction to Montana territory. For the first time since the stagecoach attack, Priscilla felt a genuine laugh bubble up from her chest. When you put it that way, Mr. Braddock, perhaps I do belong here after all. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Nathan arranged a meeting with the town council where Priscilla presented her qualifications with as much confidence as she could muster. To her surprise and delight, they offered her the position on a trial basis, with a small cottage behind the schoolhouse provided as accommodation. Mrs. Abernathy, a sharp-minded woman in her 60s, was delighted to show Priscilla the schoolhouse and introduce her to some of the children she would be teaching. 17 students, ages 6 to 16, the older woman explained as they toured the simple one-room structure. Most are from town, though a few ride in from nearby farms. They're good children mostly, though the Zimmerman boys will test your patience something fierce. Priscilla ran her hand along the edge of the teacher's desk, a solid oak piece that dominated the front of the room. It's a lovely school. It serves its purpose. Mrs. Abernathy's eyes twinkled. Though I hear Nathan Braddock has been talking about building a proper two-room schoolhouse for years, perhaps with you here he'll finally get around to it. Priscilla felt her cheeks warm. Mr. Braddock has been very kind, but I'm sure his interest is solely in the education of Dillon's children. Of course, dear. The older woman's tone suggested she believed otherwise. Now, let me show you the cottage. It's small, but it's kept me comfortable these past 15 years. The teacher's cottage was indeed small, just one main room with a curtained-off sleeping area, a modest kitchen space, and a tiny washroom. But it was clean and well-maintained, with shelves of books and a rocking chair by the window. "It's perfect," Priscilla said honestly. "I can't thank you enough for this opportunity." "Thank the town council," Mrs. Abernathy replied with a wink, though I suspect Nathan did most of the convincing. By the end of her first week in Dillon, Priscilla had settled into the cottage, met most of her future students and their parents, and begun to feel that perhaps fate had worked in her favor after all. She had seen Emmett Davidson only once more across the street, and he had quickly turned in the opposite direction upon noticing her. Nathan had been a frequent visitor, ostensibly to help with preparations for the school term, but their conversations often strayed to more personal topics. She learned that his ranch, the Double B, had been in his family for 2 generations, that he had a younger sister who was married to a doctor in Helena, and that his favorite dessert was apple pie. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, her years working as a teacher's assistant, and her decision to answer Emmett Davidson's advertisement after her parents' deaths left her with few options. "I wanted adventure," she admitted one evening as they sat on the cottage's small porch. "And perhaps a family of my own someday. I thought heading west was my best chance at both." Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying her in the fading light. "And now? Has the adventure lived up to your expectations?" "It's certainly been more eventful than I anticipated." She smiled, remembering their first meeting on Bandit Road. "Though I never expected to start my western adventure by being rescued by a dashing cowboy." He laughed, the sound warm in the evening air. "Dashing, I think the sun might have affected your vision, Miss Turner." "Not at all, Mr. Braddock." She enjoyed the way he blushed at her teasing. "Though I do wonder why a successful rancher such as yourself was traveling alone on that particular stretch of road at precisely the right moment." Nathan's expression grew more serious. "I told you, I've been keeping an eye out for Davidson's brides. When I heard at the Mercantile that a stagecoach was coming in a day early, I had a hunch." He paused. "I didn't expect bandits, though. That road has earned its name, but attacks in broad daylight are rare." Priscilla shivered, remembering the crack of the rifle and the terrifying moments that followed. "I've been meaning to ask, do you think those bandits might have been arranged?" Nathan's brow furrowed. "By Davidson, you mean? It's possible. He's a gambler and a con man, but I've never known him to resort to outright violence." He shook his head. "No, the timing was too uncertain. Even Davidson couldn't predict exactly when your coach would reach that stretch of road." "I suppose you're right." She wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. "Still, I can't help feeling that I've had a narrow escape in more ways than one." "You have." Nathan stood, offering his hand to help her up. "But you've also shown remarkable courage. Dillon is lucky to have you, Miss Turner." She took his hand, noticing how naturally her smaller one fit into his calloused palm. "I believe I'm the fortunate one, Mr. Braddock." Their eyes met in the gathering twilight, and for a moment Priscilla thought he might kiss her. Her heart quickened at the prospect. But Nathan merely squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "It's getting late. I should let you rest before your big day tomorrow." He retrieved his hat from where it hung on the porch railing. "First day of school and all." "Yes, of course." She tried to hide her disappointment. "Thank you for all your help, Mr. Braddock." He paused at the bottom of the porch steps, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "You know, Miss Turner, in Dillon, friends usually use first names." A smile spread across her face. "In that case, good night, Nathan." "Good night, Priscilla." He tipped his hat and disappeared into the darkness, the sound of his boots on the dirt path gradually fading away. Priscilla remained on the porch long after he had gone, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. For the first time since arriving in Dillon, she felt not just resignation to her new circumstances, but genuine hope for what the future might hold. The first day of school arrived bright and clear, with a crispness to the air that hinted at the approaching autumn. Priscilla woke before dawn, her stomach fluttering with nerves as she prepared for the day ahead. She dressed in her most professional attire, a high-necked blouse and dark skirt, and arranged her hair in a simple but neat style. By 8 o'clock, children began arriving at the schoolhouse, some on foot from town, others riding in on horseback or brought by parents in wagons. They regarded their new teacher with varying degrees of curiosity and apprehension. "Good morning," Priscilla greeted each one, memorizing names and faces as quickly as she could. "Welcome to school. Please find your seats according to age, youngest in the front." By 8:30, 17 students ranging from little Emma Wilson, barely 6 years old and missing her front teeth, to tall, lanky Thomas Parker, already 16 and clearly questioning why he needed more schooling, had settled into the rows of desks. Priscilla took a deep breath and rang the small bell on her desk. "Good morning, students. I'm Miss Turner, your new teacher. Mrs. Abernathy has told me wonderful things about each of you, and I'm looking forward to a productive school year." The younger children smiled at her, while the older ones exchanged skeptical glances. A pair of freckled boys, undoubtedly, the Zimmerman brothers Mrs. Abernathy had warned her about, whispered to each other with barely concealed smirks. "Now, I know it's unusual to change teachers mid-year," Priscilla continued, undeterred, "so today we'll start by assessing where each of you stands in your studies. I'll be calling you up one by one to read a passage and complete some arithmetic problems while the rest of you write a short composition about your summer." She was about to distribute paper when the schoolhouse door opened, and Nathan stepped inside, holding his hat in his hands. "Pardon the interruption, Miss Turner. I just wanted to see how our new teacher was settling in." His eyes swept over the classroom, lingering briefly on the Zimmerman boys, who suddenly found their desktops fascinating. "And to remind everyone that the school board expects perfect behavior for Miss Turner, as she's come all the way from Philadelphia to teach you." Priscilla fought a smile at his transparent attempt to establish her authority. "Thank you, Mr. Braddock. The children and I were just getting acquainted." Nathan nodded, his eyes warm as they met hers. "I won't keep you then. Good day, Miss Turner, students." With a final warning glance at the Zimmerman boys, he departed, closing the door behind him. The morning progressed more smoothly after Nathan's visit. Priscilla assessed each child's reading and mathematics skills, finding most were at or near grade level, with a few exceptions in both directions. Young Emma could barely recognize her letters, while Thomas Parker demonstrated an unexpected gift for advanced mathematics. By noon, when she dismissed the children for their lunch break, Priscilla felt cautiously optimistic about her new role. The students filed out into the schoolyard, retrieving lunch pails from hooks by the door, and Priscilla sat at her desk to review her notes and prepare for the afternoon lessons. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see Nathan standing in the doorway, holding a covered basket. "I thought you might not have had time to prepare lunch," he explained, setting the basket on her desk. "Mrs. Porter at the hotel sent this over." Priscilla lifted the cloth to find a sandwich, an apple, and a small jar of lemonade. "How thoughtful. Please thank Mrs. Porter for me." "I will." Nathan hesitated, glancing out the window where the children played in the schoolyard. "How's it going so far?" "Better than I expected." She took a bite of the sandwich, suddenly realizing how hungry she was. "The children seem bright, though I'm not entirely sure I've won over the Zimmerman boys yet," Nathan chuckled. "Joe and Frank Zimmerman have tested the patience of everyone in Dillon at one time or another. Their father's the town barber, good man, but works long hours. The boys have too much time to dream up mischief. I'll keep that in mind." Priscilla studied him over her sandwich. "Do members of the school board often deliver lunch to new teachers, or am I receiving special treatment?" A flush crept up Nathan's neck, visible even beneath his tan. "I might have had an ulterior motive. I wanted to invite you to dinner at my ranch this Saturday. Nothing formal, just thought you might like to see more of the territory now that you're settling in." Priscilla's heart skipped a beat at the invitation. "I'd like that very much, Nathan, thank you." "Good, that's good," he cleared his throat. I'll pick you up around 4 if that suits you. It's about an hour's ride to the ranch. 4 would be perfect." The sound of the children returning from lunch saved her from having to say more. Nathan tipped his hat to her and nodded to the students as they filed back into the classroom, their curious eyes darting between their teacher and the rancher. As he left, Priscilla heard one of the older girls whisper, "Mr. Braddock's sweet on the new teacher," followed by suppressed giggles. Priscilla called the class to order with more sharpness than she had intended, her cheeks warm. "Open your readers to page 15, please. We'll continue with our lessons." The remainder of the school day passed without incident, and by 3 o'clock, Priscilla was dismissing her students with assignments for the following day. She watched them scatter in different directions, some toward town, others to waiting parents, and a few mounting horses for the ride home to outlying farms. She was gathering her materials when a shadow fell across the doorway. Looking up, she expected to see Nathan again, but instead found herself facing Emmett Davidson. "Miss Turner," he greeted her, his voice smooth as silk. "Or should I say, teacher, my congratulations on your new position." Priscilla straightened, instinctively placing the desk between them. "Mr. Davidson, what brings you to the schoolhouse?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I thought we should clear the air between us. Our last meeting ended rather abruptly. I believe I made my feelings quite clear." Priscilla kept her voice steady, though her pulse had quickened. "Our arrangement is terminated." Davidson moved further into the room, running his fingers along the edge of a student's desk. "Yes, you were quite adamant. But I've been thinking about our situation, and I believe I was hasty in dismissing you." "Dismissing me?" Priscilla repeated incredulously. "You misrepresented yourself completely. You've done the same to other women before me." He waved a dismissive hand. "Business setbacks happen to the best of men, but I'm on the verge of a significant turnaround." His eyes gleamed as he approached her desk. "I've acquired an interest in a silver mine near Helena. The initial essays are promising, very promising." Priscilla gathered her papers, keeping her movements deliberate and calm. "I'm not interested in your business ventures, Mr. Davidson. If you'll excuse me, I have preparations to make for tomorrow's lessons." She moved to step around the desk, but Davidson blocked her path, not touching her but standing close enough to make her uncomfortable. "Don't be so hasty, Miss Turner. We could still make a suitable match. A school teacher's salary can't be much, and winters here can be difficult for those without proper resources." His tone hardened slightly. "Besides, I understand you've been spending considerable time with Nathan Braddock. He has his own reputation in this town, you know." Priscilla's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, Braddock's ranch is failing?" "Has been for years. He puts on a good show, but everyone knows he's one bad season away from losing everything." Davidson smiled coldly. "Why do you think he's never married? No woman wants to tie herself to a sinking ship." "I don't believe you." Priscilla straightened her spine. "And even if it were true, a man's worth isn't measured by the size of his ranch or bank account. Now, please step aside." Davidson's face darkened. "You do well to remember you're a stranger here, Miss Turner. Your position in this town is precarious at best. One word from a respected citizen like myself to the school board about improper behavior, and you could find yourself without employment or housing." Before Priscilla could respond, the schoolhouse door swung open, revealing Sheriff Mills, a tall man with a graying mustache whom she had met briefly at the town council meeting. "Everything all right in here, Miss Turner?" he asked, his eyes fixed on Davidson. "Yes, Sheriff." Mr. Davidson was just leaving. Priscilla moved past Davidson, who reluctantly stepped aside. "Indeed I was." Davidson retrieved his hat, nodding cordially to the sheriff. "Just welcoming our new teacher to Dillon. Good day, Miss Turner, Sheriff." With that, he strode from the schoolhouse, his back rigid with barely suppressed anger. Sheriff Mills watched him go, then turned back to Priscilla. "Nathan asked me to check in on you before I finished my rounds. Said Davidson had been asking questions about your schedule." Relief washed over her. "Thank you, Sheriff. I don't think Mr. Davidson intended any harm, but I appreciate your timely arrival." The sheriff's expression suggested he wasn't so certain about Davidson's intentions. I'd be careful around that one, Miss Turner. He's got a way of making trouble for folks who cross him." He adjusted his hat. "I'll walk you to your cottage." As they crossed the short distance from the schoolhouse to her small home, Priscilla considered Davidson's words about Nathan. Surely they were nothing more than the spiteful lies of a jealous man. But a seed of doubt had been planted, and she found herself wondering how much she truly knew about Nathan Braddock. Saturday arrived with perfect early autumn weather, clear blue skies, gentle breezes, and temperatures warm enough for comfort without the oppressive heat of summer. Priscilla spent the morning cleaning her cottage and the afternoon preparing for her dinner at Nathan's ranch, alternating between excitement and nervousness. At precisely 4 o'clock, the sound of horses outside her door announced Nathan's arrival. He had come with a wagon rather than horseback, and Priscilla was grateful her riding skills were rudimentary at best. "Good afternoon," Nathan greeted her, helping her up onto the wagon seat. He was dressed more formally than she had seen him before, in a clean white shirt, dark vest, and polished boots. His hat appeared newer as well. "You look lovely." Priscilla smoothed the skirt of her blue dress, the one she had initially saved for meeting Emmett Davidson. "Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing your ranch." As they traveled north out of town, the landscape opened up before them, rolling hills covered in golden grass, patches of pine and aspen, and in the distance, the jagged peaks of mountains. Nathan pointed out landmarks as they went, telling her stories about the area's history and the people who had settled it. "My grandfather came here in '46, he explained, guiding the horses around a bend in the road. "He was one of the first ranchers in this part of the territory. Started with just 20 head of cattle and a dream." Priscilla listened, fascinated by the pride in his voice. "And now, how large is your operation?" A shadow crossed his face briefly. "Not as large as it once was. We had some hard years after my father died. Drought, harsh winters, rustlers. But we're holding on." She thought of Davidson's words about Nathan's ranch failing but pushed them aside. "It takes courage to face such challenges." "Or stubbornness," he replied with a self-deprecating smile. "My sister Clara thinks I should have sold years ago and moved to Helena to start fresh. But the Braddock land means too much to me to give up without a fight." They crested a hill and Nathan reined in the horses. There it is, the Double B. Below them stretched a valley cradled by gentle slopes. A creek wound through the center, its banks lined with cottonwoods. Near the creek stood a substantial log house with a wide porch, several outbuildings, and corrals where cattle and horses grazed. Beyond, herds of cattle dotted the grasslands. "It's beautiful," Priscilla said sincerely. The ranch might not be as large as some, but it was well maintained and picturesque. Nathan's expression softened as he gazed at his home. "It is, isn't it? Most days I can't imagine being anywhere else." He flicked the reins and they continued down the hill toward the ranch house. As they approached, a weathered man with silver hair emerged from one of the outbuildings, waving a greeting. "That's Hank Wilson," Nathan explained. "He's been with us since my father's time, foreman, ranch hand, and practically family all rolled into one." They pulled up in front of the ranch house and Nathan helped Priscilla down from the wagon. Hank approached, removing his hat. "Miss Turner, I presume," he said with a slight bow. "The boss has talked of little else all week." "Hank," Nathan warned, but there was no real heat in his tone. The older man grinned, unrepentant. "Just telling the truth, boss. Miss Turner, welcome to the Double B. I hope you'll find it to your liking." "Thank you, Mr. Wilson. It's a pleasure to meet you." Priscilla liked the foreman immediately, with his frank manner and kind eyes. "I'll take care of the horses," Hank offered. "You two go on inside. Martha's been cooking up a storm since dawn." Nathan led Priscilla up the steps to the porch, which wrapped around the front of the house and offered sweeping views of the valley. "Martha's our cook," he explained, opening the front door. "She and her husband Carlos handle most of the house and garden work. They live in the cabin just past the barn." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly spacious and comfortable. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, with well-worn but quality furniture arranged for conversation. Bookshelves lined another wall, filled with volumes that suggested regular use rather than decoration. "It's lovely," Priscilla said, noting the feminine touches that softened the otherwise masculine space: embroidered cushions, framed landscapes, vases of fresh wildflowers. "Did your sister help with the decorating?" Nathan nodded. "Clara insists I maintain certain standards even as a bachelor. She visits a few times a year to ensure I haven't descended into complete savagery." A plump, gray-haired woman emerged from what Priscilla presumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "I heard voices. You must be Miss Turner. I'm Martha Lopez." Her accent held traces of her Mexican heritage, but her English was perfect. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Lopez. Something smells wonderful." Martha beamed. "Beef roast with rosemary and garlic, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. The boss said to prepare my best." Nathan cleared his throat. "Martha, why don't you finish dinner preparations while I show Miss Turner around the ranch?" Martha's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Of course, Chief. Dinner will be ready in 1 hour." She disappeared back into the kitchen, humming to herself. The tour of the ranch was thorough and unhurried. Nathan showed Priscilla the barn with its hand-hewn beams, the blacksmith shop where he did most of his own metalwork, the spring house where milk and butter were kept cool, and the vegetable garden tended by Martha and Carlos. "You're quite self-sufficient," Priscilla observed as they wandered among rows of late-season squash and root vegetables. "We try to be. Town's too far for daily trips, especially in winter." Nathan picked a ripe tomato, offering it to her. "During bad snowstorms, we might be cut off for weeks at a time." Priscilla considered this as she bit into the tomato, which was warm from the sun and bursting with flavor. "That would take some adjustment for a city girl like me, but not impossible." There was something in his tone that made her look up sharply, catching an expression in his eyes that sent a flutter through her chest. "No," she said softly, "not impossible at all." Their gazes held for a long moment before Nathan looked away, gesturing toward a corral where several horses grazed. "Would you like to see the horses before dinner? I have a gentle mare that would suit you if you ever wanted to learn to ride properly." "I'd like that." Priscilla followed him to the fence where a beautiful chestnut mare lifted her head at their approach. "She's lovely." "That's Penny. She's sweet-tempered but spirited when she needs to be." Nathan whistled softly and the horse trotted over to the fence. "Here, she likes apples." He produced one from his pocket, placing it in Priscilla's palm. The mare's soft muzzle tickled her hand as the horse delicately took the treat. Priscilla laughed in delight. "She's so gentle." "Good judge of character," Nathan murmured, standing close enough that Priscilla could feel the warmth of him at her side. Before she could respond, Martha appeared at the back door of the house, calling that dinner was ready. The moment broke, but something had shifted between them: a tension, a possibility, an unspoken question hovering in the air. Dinner was served in the ranch house's dining room, a simple but elegant space with a table that could seat 8 comfortably. Martha had outdone herself with the meal, which included not only the promised roast but also creamed corn, fresh bread, and a bottle of wine that Nathan explained had been a gift from his brother-in-law. "This is wonderful," Priscilla said after her first few bites. "Mrs. Lopez is an exceptional cook. She keeps threatening to retire to her daughter's place in Denver, but I think she stays because she worries I'd starve without her." Nathan smiled fondly. "She and Carlos have been with the ranch since I was a boy. You're fortunate to have such loyal help." "They're more than help, their family." Nathan refilled her wine glass. "Speaking of which, how are you finding Dylan? Beginning to feel at home?" Priscilla considered the question. "More than I expected to, actually. The children are bright and eager to learn for the most part. And everyone has been welcoming." She hesitated. "Well, almost everyone." Nathan's expression darkened. "Davidson approached you again, didn't he? Sheriff Mills mentioned something." "At the schoolhouse after classes on Monday." Priscilla took a sip of wine. "He suggested that my position in town is precarious and implied he could cause trouble for me with the school board." Nathan's hand tightened around his fork. "That's typical of him. He can't stand being crossed." He set the fork down deliberately. "What else did he say?" Priscilla hesitated, reluctant to repeat Davidson's claims about Nathan's financial situation. Nothing of consequence, empty threats mostly. Nathan studied her face. There's something you're not telling me, she sighed, realizing he wouldn't let the matter drop. He said your ranch was failing, that everyone in town knows it. To her surprise, Nathan's expression relaxed slightly. Is that all? Well, he's not entirely wrong, though he's exaggerating as usual. What do you mean? Nathan leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. The Double B isn't what it once was, as I mentioned earlier. My father expanded too quickly before he died, taking on debt that became difficult to service after several bad seasons. I've had to sell off some land and reduce the herd size to keep the operation solvent. I'm sorry, Priscilla said quietly. That must have been difficult. It was, still is sometimes. His expression grew determined. But things are turning around. Last year's calf crop was the best in a decade and beef prices are strong. Another year or two like this and the Double B will be back on solid ground. Priscilla felt a rush of admiration for his perseverance. I've no doubt you'll succeed. You strike me as a man who doesn't give up easily. A slow smile spread across his face. You've got that right, Miss Turner. His eyes held hers. When I believe in something or someone, I don't let go. The implications of his words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning that made Priscilla's heart beat faster. Before she could respond, Martha entered with the promised apple pie, breaking the moment. They finished dinner with lighter conversation, and afterward, Nathan suggested they watch the sunset from the porch. The western sky was ablaze with orange and pink as they settled into rocking chairs, each with a cup of coffee. I should have warned you, Nathan said as darkness gradually claimed the valley. Once you've seen a Montana sunset, nothing else quite compares. It's magnificent, Priscilla agreed, sipping her coffee. Almost worth the journey alone. Almost, Nathan raised an eyebrow. She smiled into her cup. Well, there have been other compensations for the difficulties of the journey, such as the satisfaction of teaching eager minds, the kindness of new friends, she glanced at him, meeting someone who would fix a broken wheel under threat from bandits. Nathan set his cup on the small table between them. Priscilla, there's something I need to tell you about the day we met. The seriousness in his tone made her turn fully toward him. What is it? I wasn't on that road by accident. Or even just because I suspected Davidson had another bride coming. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I received a warning from Hank's nephew, who works at the telegraph office in Helena. He intercepted a message about a planned robbery of the Stagecoach. When I heard a coach was coming in early, I rode out to intercept it. Priscilla's eyes widened. You knew the bandits would attack, I suspected. The message was vague, but it mentioned a special passenger on the Dillon stage. His expression was grim. I think someone knew you were coming with money for Davidson. It might have been Davidson himself who arranged it, or someone else who had a grudge against him. Either way, you were in danger. But I had no money, Priscilla protested, just enough for my journey. Davidson often exaggerates the wealth of his brides to be when bragging at the saloon. Some people might have believed you were carrying a substantial dowry. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. I've been trying to prove a connection between Davidson and the bandits, but so far I've got nothing solid. Priscilla sat back, processing this information. So when you appeared on the road that day, I was looking for you specifically, yes, though I didn't expect the wheel to be shot out. He met her gaze directly. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to frighten you further, and later, well, I wasn't sure how to explain without sounding like I had orchestrated the whole thing to meet you. Did you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Nathan looked shocked. God, no, I would never, he broke off, seeing the teasing smile spreading across her face. You're joking. I am. She reached across the space between them, placing her hand on his. Thank you for telling me the truth and for coming to my rescue, intentional or not. His fingers curled around hers, warm and strong. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. In the growing darkness, with the first stars appearing overhead and the sounds of the ranch settling for the night, they sat in companionable silence, hands linked across the space between their chairs. Priscilla felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years, perhaps ever. It's getting late, Nathan said eventually, though he made no move to release her hand. I should get you back to town. Yes, I suppose you should. Priscilla reluctantly withdrew her hand. I've had a wonderful evening, Nathan. Thank you for inviting me. He helped her to her feet, and they stood facing each other on the porch, close enough that she could see the play of moonlight across his features. Without warning, he reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Priscilla, he said softly, I know you came to Dylan expecting one life and found another entirely, but I can't help feeling that maybe it was meant to be this way. Her breath caught at his touch. I'm beginning to think the same. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Nathan leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, but when Priscilla's hands came up to rest on his chest, it deepened into something more urgent, more passionate. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing rapidly. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his hands at her waist. I've been wanting to do that since I first saw you standing beside that broken-down stagecoach, he confessed. Priscilla smiled, her heart full. I believe I've wanted it too, though I might not have admitted it to myself until recently. Nathan stepped back reluctantly, keeping hold of her hand. I should get you home before I forget my manners entirely. The ride back to Dylan was filled with comfortable conversation interspersed with companionable silences. Nathan's hand frequently found hers on the seat between them, and Priscilla marveled at how natural it felt, as though they had known each other for years rather than weeks. As they approached her cottage, however, Nathan grew tense, sitting straighter on the wagon seat and scanning the darkness. What is it? Priscilla asked, noticing the change in his demeanor. Probably nothing, just being cautious. But his hand moved closer to the rifle secured beside the seat. When they pulled up in front of her cottage, Nathan insisted on checking inside before allowing her to enter. Priscilla waited on the porch, watching as he lit a lamp and moved through the small space. All clear, he reported, returning to the door, but I don't like you being out here alone, especially with Davidson making threats. I'll be fine, she assured him, though his concern warmed her. The sheriff's office isn't far, and I've become quite proficient with the door lock. Nathan didn't look convinced. I'll speak with Sheriff Mills tomorrow about keeping an eye on your place. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his, and I'll be back to check on you after church. I'd like that. Priscilla stood on tiptoe to press a quick kiss to his cheek. Good night, Nathan. He caught her before she could step away, pulling her into another kiss that left her breathless. Good night, Priscilla. With visible reluctance, he descended the porch steps and returned to his wagon. Priscilla watched until he disappeared down the road before entering her cottage and securing the door. As she prepared for bed, her mind replayed the evening, the tour of Nathan's beautiful ranch, the delicious dinner, their conversation on the porch, and most of all, those kisses that had awakened feelings she hadn't known she possessed. She fell asleep with a smile on her lips, dreaming of Montana sunsets and a cowboy with eyes the color of the summer sky. The next few weeks passed in a whirl of activity for Priscilla. Her days were filled with teaching, her evenings often spent in Nathan's company. They attended church together on Sundays, rode to nearby scenic spots when weather permitted, and sometimes simply sat on her cottage porch, talking until the stars came out. News of their courtship, for that was what it had become, spread quickly through Dylan. Most reactions were positive, with many townspeople expressing approval of the match. Mrs. Porter at the hotel was particularly delighted, taking credit for having seen the spark from the beginning. Even the children at school took notice, with the younger ones giggling when Nathan came to walk Priscilla home, and the older girls sighing romantically over the story of how they had met. The Zimmerman boys, who had initially tested her authority, became unexpectedly protective, declaring that Miss Turner is going to be Mrs. Braddock, so you better be nice to her. Only Emmett Davidson seemed displeased by the development. He had taken to watching Priscilla from a distance when she was in town, his expression dark. Twice, he had approached her in public places, making veiled remarks about Nathan's financial situation or questioning the propriety of her rapid courtship. Each time, Priscilla had refused to engage, walking away with her head held high. On the first Friday in October, Nathan invited Priscilla to join him at the Double B for the weekend. Martha and Carlos would be visiting their daughter in Denver, but Hank would be present as chaperone, ensuring the arrangement remained proper. "I want to show you the aspen groves in the North Pasture," Nathan explained as they rode in his wagon that Friday afternoon. "The leaves are turning gold and it's quite a sight." "I'd love that," Priscilla replied, nestling closer to him on the seat. The autumn air had a crisp bite to it, and she was grateful for the warm shawl he had brought for her. "I've never seen a proper autumn in the mountains. It's different from back east, shorter, more intense." His arm tightened around her shoulders. "Winter comes early here, first snow could be just weeks away." The thought of snow made Priscilla shiver, both with anticipation and a touch of apprehension. Will the school close for bad weather? "Only for the worst storms. Montana children are hardy folk, they'll wade through quite a bit of snow for their education." He glanced at her, his expression growing more serious. "Priscilla, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Her heart skipped a beat at his tone. "Yes." But before he could continue, the sound of galloping hooves approached from behind. Nathan turned, his body tensing as he recognized the rider. "Hank, what is it?" he called as the foreman brought his horse alongside the wagon. The older man's face was grave. "Fire, boss, the North Pasture." "Carlos spotted the smoke before they left for Denver and rode back to alert me. I've got the hands gathering what firefighting equipment we have, but it's spreading fast with this wind." Nathan's expression hardened. "The cattle, moving them to the South Range now." "But the aspen grove you were talking about, taking Miss Turner to see, it's right in the path of the flames." Nathan handed Priscilla the reins. "Can you handle these for a moment?" She nodded, gripping the leather straps as Nathan conferred quietly with Hank. Their expressions grew increasingly grim as they spoke. "Take Miss Turner to town," Nathan finally instructed Hank. "Then come back with as many men as you can round up. Bring shovels, wet blankets, whatever we can use to dig fire breaks." "Nathan, no," Priscilla protested. "I want to help." He turned to her, his face softening slightly. "It's too dangerous, Priscilla. I can't have you there and be focused on fighting the fire." "I won't get in the way," she insisted. "I can help with water, tend to injuries, whatever is needed." Nathan hesitated, looking at Hank, who shrugged. "Could use every hand, boss, and the schoolmarm seems like she's got a level head." After a moment's consideration, Nathan nodded. "All right, but you stay with the wagon at the ranch house unless I say otherwise. Promise me?" "I promise." Priscilla handed the reins back to him, and they set off at a faster pace, with Hank galloping ahead to organize the ranch hands. As they crested the hill overlooking the Double B, the gravity of the situation became clear. Black smoke billowed from the northern edge of Nathan's property, where the wind was driving flames through dry grass and timber. Ranch hands on horseback were visible in the distance, driving cattle toward the southern pastures. Nathan drove the wagon directly to the ranch house, where Carlos was loading tools into a cart. "I thought you and Martha were headed to Denver," Nathan called as he helped Priscilla down from the wagon. "The fire is more important, Chief." Carlos wiped sweat from his brow. "Martha is preparing food and bandages. She says the men will need them before the night is over." Nathan clasped the older man's shoulder. "Thank you, my friend, but your daughter is expecting you. She will understand." Carlos's expression was determined. "This ranch is our home, too." Priscilla followed Nathan into the house, where Martha was indeed bustling about the kitchen, wrapping sandwiches and filling canteens. "Miss Turner," the older woman looked surprised. "You shouldn't be here, it's too dangerous." "I want to help," Priscilla replied, already rolling up her sleeves. "Tell me what to do." Martha's expression shifted from concern to approval. "We need more bandages. There's clean cotton in the linen cupboard. Tear it into strips and boil them to sterilize." For the next hour, Priscilla worked alongside Martha, preparing supplies for the firefighters. Through the kitchen window, she could see men arriving from town, answering Hank's call for assistance. They gathered in the yard, receiving instructions from Nathan before heading north toward the fire line. As dusk approached, the sky took on an eerie orange glow and the smell of smoke grew stronger. Priscilla stepped onto the porch for a better view and was alarmed to see the fire had advanced considerably, despite the men's efforts. Martha joined her, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's moving too fast. The wind is against us." "Will it reach the house?" Priscilla asked, her throat tight with concern. "I pray not, but if the wind doesn't change." The older woman crossed herself. "We should prepare just in case. Help me gather the important papers from the office." They worked efficiently, collecting documents and family mementos that Nathan would want preserved. As they were securing these in a trunk that could be quickly loaded onto a wagon, the back door burst open, and two ranch hands staggered in, supporting a third between them. "Jim's got a bad burn on his arm," one explained. "Boss said to bring him back." Priscilla helped them get the injured man to a chair while Martha gathered the medical supplies they had prepared. The burn was angry and blistered, covering most of his forearm. "Water," Jim gasped, his face gray with pain. "The boss needs water. They're running out at the fire line." Martha looked at Priscilla. "Carlos took the last of the canteens, but there's more water in the spring house. We could fill buckets, but we'd need the wagon to transport them." "I can drive it," Priscilla decided. "You stay and tend to Jim. Tell me where to go." Martha hesitated only briefly before giving directions. "Follow the north trail until you see the men. You can't miss them. They'll be the ones beating at the flames with wet blankets and shovels, but be careful. If the wind shifts, the fire could change direction in an instant." With the help of the two uninjured ranch hands, Priscilla loaded the wagon with every container they could fill with water. Then, gathering her courage, she took the reins and set off toward the fire line. The closer she got, the more apocalyptic the scene became. The once beautiful aspen grove was now a wall of flame, with men silhouetted against it as they desperately dug trenches and beat at encroaching flames with wet sacks. The heat was intense even from a distance, and embers floated on the wind like malevolent fireflies. Priscilla spotted Nathan at the center of the activity, shouting instructions and working alongside his men. His face was streaked with soot, his shirt soaked with sweat and water. When he saw the wagon approaching, he broke away from the line, running to intercept her. "Priscilla, what are you doing here?" His voice was hoarse from smoke and shouting, bringing water. "Jim said you were running low." Relief washed over his exhausted features. "Thank God. We've been using everything we have to wet the blankets and sacks." He called to several men, who rushed to unload the water containers from the wagon. "How bad is it?" Priscilla asked, watching as men doused themselves and their equipment with the precious water. Nathan wiped his face with his bandana, leaving a clean streak amid the soot. "We're holding the line for now, but barely, if the wind doesn't shift soon." He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. A shout from further down the line drew his attention. "I have to get back." "Go to the ranch house, Priscilla. Please." Before she could respond, he was running back to the fire line where flames had broken through the makeshift barrier and were threatening to advance. Priscilla hesitated, torn between following his instructions and staying to help. But as she watched the men fighting desperately against the encroaching fire, she knew she couldn't leave. Instead, she drove the wagon to a safer distance and began refilling containers as men brought them to her. Hour after hour, she worked alongside the firefighters, providing water, basic first aid for minor burns and cuts, and encouragement to the exhausted men. Near midnight, the wind began to shift, pushing the fire back on itself rather than toward the ranch buildings. A cheer went up from the fire line, though the men continued their work with undiminished urgency. By dawn, the worst was over. The fire had consumed most of the north pasture and the beautiful aspen grove, but the ranch buildings were safe, and no lives had been lost. Nathan found Priscilla sitting on the wagon's tailgate, her dress smoke-stained and her hair escaping its pins. He looked even worse, exhausted, covered in soot, with a nasty burn on one forearm that she had bandaged hours earlier. "You didn't go back to the house," he said, his voice a rasp. "No." She handed him a canteen, which he drank from gratefully. "I couldn't leave." He sat beside her, his shoulders slumping with fatigue. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "Thank you," she smiled tiredly. "Is it over?" mostly. We'll keep watch for hotspots, but the danger has passed. He surveyed the blackened landscape. It could have been much worse, if the wind hadn't shifted when it did, or if the men from town hadn't come so quickly. How did it start? Priscilla asked, realizing she hadn't thought to question the fire's origin until now. Nathan's expression darkened. It wasn't natural, that's for certain. Someone set it deliberately at the north corner of my property where it would be driven by the wind straight toward the ranch buildings. Who would do such a thing? Priscilla gasped. I have my suspicions. His jaw tightened, but no proof, not yet. They sat in silence for a moment, watching as the first rays of sun illuminated the smoke-hazed landscape. Despite the devastation, there was a stark beauty to it, the contrast of black earth against the golden autumn light, the silhouettes of men and horses against the brightening sky. I'm sorry our weekend was ruined, Nathan said finally. I had plans. Priscilla leaned against his shoulder, too tired to maintain proper distance. It wasn't ruined, different yes, but not ruined. She looked up at him. I learned something important. What's that? That the Double B isn't just land and cattle and buildings. She gestured to the men still working in the distance. It's people who care enough to fight all night to save it. It's a community that comes together in a crisis. It's a place worth protecting. Nathan's arm came around her shoulders, drawing her closer. You understand, then? I do. She rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. And I understand why you could never give it up, no matter what financial challenges you've faced. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. There's something I was going to ask you yesterday before Hank brought news of the fire. Priscilla's heart quickened. Yes, before he could continue, Hank approached, looking as exhausted as they felt. Boss, Sheriff Mills is here. Says he needs to speak with you. It's important. Nathan sighed, giving Priscilla's shoulders a squeeze before standing. I'll be right there. He offered her his hand. Come with me. This might concern you too. They found Sheriff Mills near the ranch house, his expression grave as he surveyed the damage from horseback. Nate, Miss Turner, he greeted them, tipping his hat. Glad to see you both safe. That was a close call. Too close, Nathan agreed. And no accident, I'm thinking. The sheriff nodded. That's why I'm here. Got word early this morning that Emmett Davidson was seen riding hard toward Helena late yesterday afternoon, just before the fire was spotted. Nathan's hand tightened around Priscilla's. That proves nothing. No, but this might. The sheriff reached into his coat, withdrawing a scorched piece of fabric. Found this near where the fire started. Looks like a piece of Davidson's fancy waistcoat, the one with the silver threads he's so proud of. Priscilla recognized it immediately. That is his. I remember noticing it at the saloon the day I confronted him. Sheriff Mills tucked the fabric away carefully. I'll be sending a wire to the Helena authorities to detain him. With this evidence and witness statements about his threats against both of you, we should be able to hold him for arson, at least. Nathan's expression was hard. Make sure they know he's dangerous and likely to run if given the chance. I will. The sheriff tipped his hat again. Miss Turner, you might want to be extra cautious until we have Davidson in custody. He seemed particularly fixated on you, according to folks in town. After the sheriff departed, Nathan walked Priscilla to the house, where Martha insisted they both eat something before resting. The kitchen table was crowded with exhausted ranch hands and townspeople who had stayed to help, all wolfing down the hearty breakfast Martha had prepared. Everyone can sleep in the bunkhouse, Nathan announced after the meal. There's room if we double up. I want to thank you all for what you did last night. You saved the Double B. There were nods of acknowledgement and a few gruff, you'd have done the same for us responses. One by one, the men finished eating and headed for the bunkhouse, eager for rest after the long night's battle. You should sleep too, Priscilla told Nathan when they were alone in the kitchen, Martha having gone to check on the injured men in the bunkhouse. You've been awake for over 24 hours, he smiled tiredly. So have you. Martha's prepared the guest room for you upstairs. I'll be in my room across the hall if you need anything. Priscilla nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion now that the crisis had passed. Nathan walked her to the guest room, lingering at the doorway. Priscilla, about what I was going to ask you yesterday. It can wait, she assured him, seeing how his eyes were struggling to stay open. We both need rest. There will be time later, he nodded reluctantly. Later, then. He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Sleep well. Despite her exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily. Every time Priscilla closed her eyes, she saw flames leaping toward the sky and Nathan silhouetted against them. The knowledge that someone likely Emmett Davidson had deliberately set the fire with the intention of destroying Nathan's home and livelihood was chilling. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were troubled, filled with fire and pursuit. She woke with a start several hours later, disoriented in the unfamiliar room. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, suggesting it was late afternoon. After washing her face and changing into a clean dress that Martha had left for her slightly too large but fresh and smoke-free, Priscilla made her way downstairs. The house was quiet, with most of its inhabitants still sleeping after the night's exertions. In the kitchen, she found Nathan at the table, freshly bathed and dressed, studying a map of his property. He looked up as she entered, his face brightening. "You're awake. How did you sleep?" "Well enough." She didn't mention the nightmares. "And you?" "A few hours." "Too much to do to sleep longer," he gestured to the map. "I'm calculating the damage. We lost about a quarter of our grazing land, including the winter pasture I was saving for the calves." His expression was grim but determined. "It's a setback, but we'll manage." Priscilla joined him at the table, studying the map. "How long will it take for the grass to grow back?" "By spring, if we get good rain, but winter will be lean." He ran a hand through his still damp hair. "I may need to sell more cattle than planned to get through until then." "I'm so sorry, Nathan." She placed her hand over his. "This is all because of me, isn't it? Davidson would never have done this if not for my presence in your life." Nathan turned his hand to grasp hers firmly. "No, don't think that for a moment. Davidson has had a grudge against me for years, since I testified against him in a land dispute. You might have been the trigger, but he was looking for an excuse." His blue eyes held hers intently. "And even if that weren't true, you would be worth it. Every acre, every head of cattle, every building on this ranch, I'd trade it all for you in a heartbeat." Priscilla's breath caught at the raw emotion in his voice. "Nathan, I love you, Priscilla. I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you standing beside that broken-down stagecoach, looking so determined despite everything." He squeezed her hand. "I was going to wait for a more romantic moment to tell you, but after last night, I don't want to waste any more time." Tears pricked at her eyes. "I love you too. I never expected to find this when I came west, but now I can't imagine my life without you." Nathan stood, drawing her to her feet and into his arms. His kiss was tender at first, then deepening with all the emotion of their declarations. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, his arms still holding her close. "Marry me," he whispered. "Not because you need a husband or I need a wife, but because we belong together, because I want to face whatever comes next, good or bad, with you by my side." Joy bubbled up within her, bright and unstoppable. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." His smile was radiant as he reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet pouch. "I've been carrying this around for a week, waiting for the right moment." He tipped a ring into his palm, a simple gold band with a small but perfect diamond. "It was my mother's." Priscilla's hands trembled as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, catching the late afternoon sunlight that streamed through the kitchen windows. "It's beautiful," she whispered, admiring the way it looked on her hand, a tangible symbol of promises made and a future shared. Nathan lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her fingers just above the ring. "When I brought you here yesterday, I had planned a romantic proposal by the aspen grove." He glanced ruefully out the window toward the blackened northern pasture. "This isn't quite what I had in mind." Priscilla cupped his face in her hands, smiling through happy tears. "It's perfect. We've faced danger together and come through it stronger. What better beginning could there be?" His arms tightened around her waist. "When shall we marry? I don't want a long engagement." "Nor do I," she agreed, "but we should wait until after harvest so everyone can attend without worry." She considered the calendar. "The first Saturday in November, that gives us 3 weeks to prepare." 3 weeks, Nathan repeated, as though testing his ability to wait that long. Very well, the first Saturday in November it is. Their second kiss was interrupted by the kitchen door opening as Martha returned from the bunkhouse. She took one look at their embrace and the ring on Priscilla's finger and let out a cry of delight. Gracias a Dios, finally, she rushed forward to embrace them both. I was beginning to think the boss would never get around to asking, Nathan laughed, keeping one arm around Priscilla's waist. I was waiting for the right moment. After a night fighting fire and nearly losing everything, Martha shook her head, her eyes twinkling. Men. Always making things more complicated than they need to be. Word of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch and then to town when they returned the following day. Priscilla was touched by the genuine happiness expressed by the people of Dillon, many of whom had known Nathan his entire life and had worried about his solitary existence. Mrs. Porter at the hotel insisted on hosting an engagement dinner, declaring that our new teacher and our finest rancher deserve a proper celebration. The general store owner, Mr. Jenkins, offered a discount on fabric for a wedding dress. Even the Zimmerman boys, usually so mischievous, presented Priscilla with a hand-carved wooden pencil box as a gift. The only shadow on their happiness was Emmett Davidson, who had vanished from Helena before the authorities could detain him. Sheriff Mills warned them to remain vigilant, but as days passed with no sign of the man, they began to hope he had fled the territory entirely. The 3 weeks until their wedding flew by in a flurry of preparations. Priscilla continued teaching while Nathan worked to secure his ranch for the coming winter. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch of her cottage, planning their future together. "You'll move to the ranch after the wedding," Nathan said one such evening, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sun set. "But we'll need to find another teacher to finish the school year, unless you want to continue teaching." Priscilla considered this. "I enjoy teaching, but the ranch is too far for a daily commute, especially in winter. Perhaps I could train a replacement and still be involved occasionally, or we could build a small schoolhouse closer to the ranch," Nathan suggested. "There are enough children in the surrounding farms to justify it. You could teach there a few days a week." She smiled, touched by his willingness to accommodate her interests. "That's a wonderful idea, though I may need to take some time away from teaching entirely at first." "Oh." Nathan raised an eyebrow questioningly. Priscilla's cheeks warmed slightly. "Well, I hope we'll have children of our own before too long. I'd want to be home with them when they're small." A look of tenderness filled Nathan's eyes. "I'd like that very much. A house full of children with your determination and intelligence. And your courage and kindness," she added, leaning against him contentedly. The first Saturday in November dawned clear and cold, with the first dusting of snow on the distant mountains. Priscilla dressed in her cottage with the help of Mrs. Porter and several other women from town, who had taken her under their wing since her arrival in Dillon. Her wedding dress was simple but elegant white cotton with lace trim that the dressmaker, Mrs. Chen, had worked day and night to complete. Her hair was arranged with white flowers, and around her neck hung a delicate silver locket that had belonged to Nathan's mother, his wedding gift to her. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Porter declared, adjusting the veil one last time. "Nathan Braddock won't know what hit him." Priscilla smiled, too full of emotion to speak. How different this day was from what she had imagined when she first left Philadelphia. Instead of marrying a stranger for security, she was marrying a man she loved deeply, surrounded by a community that had become like family. The church was packed when Sheriff Mills escorted her down the aisle, having agreed to give her away in the absence of her father. Nathan waited at the altar, his eyes never leaving her as she approached. He looked handsome in a new suit, his usually tousled hair neatly combed, though a few strands had already escaped to fall across his forehead in the way she loved. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, and Priscilla felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged, not with Emmett Davidson or any other man who had answered her advertisement, but with Nathan Braddock, who had fixed not only a broken stagecoach wheel but her broken dreams as well. Their vows were traditional, but spoken with such sincerity that many in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. When Nathan slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady but his voice thick with emotion. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Nathan's kiss was both tender and promising, a perfect beginning to their life together. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, the church erupted in applause and cheers, led enthusiastically by the Zimmerman boys. The celebration that followed at the hotel was joyous, with music, dancing, and more food than Priscilla had seen since leaving Philadelphia. Nathan kept her close throughout, introducing her as my wife with undisguised pride. As the evening wore on, Sheriff Mills approached them, his expression serious despite the festive atmosphere. "I hate to bring business to your wedding day," he said quietly, "but I thought you should know. We've received word that Emmett Davidson was apprehended in Denver. He won't be troubling you anymore." Relief washed over Priscilla. "Thank you for telling us, Sheriff. That's the best wedding present we could receive." "Indeed," Nathan agreed, his arm tightening around her waist. "Now we can truly put that chapter behind us." As the celebration continued around them, Nathan led Priscilla out onto the hotel's small balcony. The night air was cold but refreshing after the warmth of the crowded reception. "Happy, Mrs. Braddock?" Nathan asked, drawing her into his arms. The name sent a thrill through her. "Incredibly so, Mr. Braddock." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his expression one of wonder. "When I rode out to intercept that stagecoach 2 months ago, I never imagined I'd find my future wife. I was just trying to prevent another of Davidson's schemes, and I never imagined that a broken wheel on Bandit Road would lead me to true happiness." Priscilla rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "It's strange how life works sometimes." "Not strange," Nathan corrected gently. "Providential." He tipped her chin up to meet his gaze. "I believe we were meant to find each other, Priscilla. All the hardships, all the wrong turns, they were leading us to that moment on that road." As they sealed this declaration with a kiss, snow began to fall gently around them, the first proper snowfall of the season, dusting their shoulders and hair with white flakes that sparkled in the light spilling from the hotel windows. "Our first snow as husband and wife," Priscilla murmured against his lips. "A good omen, I think." "The best," Nathan agreed, holding her close as the snow continued to fall, blanketing Dylan in a pristine white covering that symbolized their fresh start together. 5 years later, Priscilla Braddock stood on the porch of the Double B Ranch house, watching as the stagecoach wound its way up the long drive. Beside her, Nathan bounced their youngest child, 2-year-old James, on his hip, while their 3-year-old daughter, Emma, clutched at Priscilla's skirt. "Is that Aunt Clara?" Emma asked, her blue eyes so like her father's wide with excitement. "Yes, sweetheart, Aunt Clara, Uncle Michael, and your cousins are coming for the Harvest Festival." Priscilla smoothed her daughter's dark curls. "Remember your manners now." The ranch had flourished in the 5 years since their wedding. The fire damage had long since healed, with new grass growing even more abundantly after the burn. Nathan had expanded the herd gradually, and last year's cattle prices had allowed them to purchase the adjacent property that had once belonged to the Henderson family. Most importantly, the Double B was now truly a home, filled with the laughter of children and the warmth of family. The small schoolhouse Nathan had promised had been built halfway between the ranch and town, where Priscilla taught 3 days a week when she wasn't caring for their growing family. Emmett Davidson was a distant memory, serving time in a Denver prison for arson and fraud. His case had drawn attention to the mail-order bride scheme, leading to stricter regulations and better protections for women traveling west to marry. As the stagecoach drew to a halt in front of the house, Nathan set James down and stepped forward to help his sister alight. Clara Braddock Mills was Nathan's opposite in coloring fair, where he was dark but shared his direct gaze and determined chin. Behind her came her husband, Dr. Michael Mills, and their twin daughters, Sarah and Rebecca, Nathan, Priscilla. Clara embraced them both before kneeling to greet her niece and nephew. My goodness, how they've grown. Emma, you're practically a young lady now. The children were soon playing together in the yard under Martha's watchful eye, while the adults settled on the porch with coffee and fresh baked cookies. The ranch looks wonderful, Clara commented, surveying the well-maintained buildings and the new barn Nathan had completed just last month. You've worked wonders here, both of you. We've been blessed, Nathan replied, his hand finding Priscilla's. Good weather, strong cattle prices, and the best partner a man could ask for. Michael leaned forward, his expression curious. I've always wondered how exactly did you two meet? I've heard bits and pieces over the years, but never the full story. Nathan and Priscilla exchanged a glance, sharing a private smile at the memories. Well, Priscilla began, it all started with a broken stagecoach wheel on Bandit Road. As she recounted their story, the attack by bandits, Nathan's timely appearance, the discovery of Emmett Davidson's true nature, and the gradual blossoming of their love, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ranch yard. In the distance, the rebuilt aspen grove gleamed golden in the autumn light, a testament to renewal and resilience. When she finished, Clara wiped a tear from her eye. What a remarkable journey, and to think if that wheel hadn't broken, or if Nathan hadn't been there at that exact moment. I would have found her eventually, Nathan said with conviction, lifting Priscilla's hand to press a kiss to her palm. Some things are simply meant to be. Later that evening, after their guests had retired to their rooms and the children were tucked into bed, Nathan and Priscilla stood on the porch together, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. 5 years, Priscilla mused, leaning against her husband's solid warmth. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I stepped off that stagecoach, and sometimes it feels like I've been here my entire life. Nathan's arm tightened around her shoulders. Any regrets? About answering that advertisement, coming west, marrying a struggling rancher instead of a supposed wealthy man. Priscilla looked up at him, seeing in his face the same handsome features that had first caught her attention on that fateful day, now made dearer by years of shared joys and challenges. Not a single one, she replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. I got exactly what I came west for: adventure, family, and love beyond anything I could have imagined. As their lips met under the canopy of stars, both were thinking the same thing. Sometimes, the most beautiful journeys begin with unexpected detours and broken wheels on dangerous roads.